Our next speaker is going to be Charlie Lewis. He'll introduce himself, but Charlie's one of our senior partners who has been working in quantum computing and other nanotechnologies, and he's going to talk about even crazier stuff that is over the horizon. Charlie.
Hi. Now I need your help. This is the first part, is an audience participation part. So blockbuster was brought up in the last one, not what you thought would be the start of a quantum computing talk. Where is the blockbuster model today still viable? And why? This is above average group. Do you know that there's still blockbuster stores open? Where? Why?
Isn't it with places that have not very good internet?
Very good. And what's the second reason? Social interaction. I'm so isolated. So this happens to be in Alaska, and so I'm isolated, and I actually want the integration. The reason I bring that up, this is really an innovation talk, and we're trying to help stimulate you, so you notice there's actually still, even for the old blockbuster model, a place for it. So we're going to talk about quantum computing, but first, so Ty, hold on touching the button. I need to bring up quantum mechanics. Quantum computing is really taking advantage of quantum mechanics. And so to make you feel good to start with, if you, in this room, I'm humbled by, I looked at who all's coming here. I mean, seriously, you're way cut above the average people. I've talked to some of the best physicists in the world, and the ones that are really honest with me, they don't understand this world. We're still learning this world. So if you feel confused about this, please, that's okay. You're just with the rest of us. The smartest people. Einstein was stumped by this world. And we don't have time for me to get into his quotes, but spooky action at a distance, and oh, by the way, I'd really like to come up with equations that get rid of it. So the next thing is this quantum world is really here all the time. It's here in this table, and it's part of the reason I can't put my hand through it. Okay? We just don't see it because of our perspective. It tends to come out in really cold, really small worlds. First two topics are going to touch on really small, really cold. Though I'm going to tell you now, somebody just last week, I was talking to a fellow person, and it came up with a at room temperature, an entangled pair of particles at room temperature. So even that we're challenging. So it's an emerging world. So if you get that, and you get that quantum computing is leveraging behaviors of quantum mechanics to do computing, that's this. It's not necessarily done only one way, just like there's more than one way to do a von Neumann computer, though there's a popular one. Make sense? Any questions on that? We're okay? Okay, so now I need a couple other helps. First, don't use this presentation to pass your physics test at the school. I hear there's some students here. I don't have time to go into enough detail, and I've had to take some liberties, so some things are not exactly completely precise. This is just designed for you to understand if it's there. And is it okay I have some fun with you? Ah, good. Go then. So, this is the first piece of the puzzle, but I'm going to first then do a story that came to me this morning. And Ty's then going to cringe and fire me after this story, because I'm going to take you into why you care about quantum computing. So I want you to go to the grocery store. I need each of you to mentally go to the grocery store. I had to think of something you could all observe. So you go around and you pick up that 8-pack of juice for little Jamie, and you get the 8-pack so that you can go through the 25 or less line rather than the individual, and maybe you saved a few pennies for it, and et cetera. And you go up to that checkout line, that register. For computer people in the room, computer register. Okay, I didn't say the jokes would be good. All right, so I go in. Now what happens? I get in a queue, not unlike a level 1, 2, 3 cash. I go up to the person at the register. Of course, I get Aunt Mary in front of me. Now Aunt Mary has a bill of $32.32, and she's sure she has the 2 pennies inside her purse. So we've all had that experience, and then I get my moment in front of the register, who singularity adds up my numbers or units one at a time. That's your current CPU. With a great deal of liberty, that's your current CPU. Now let's go to the Amazon store that was just opened. I go in that store, I gather my units the same, and I walk out. I don't stand in front of any cash register. Welcome to quantum computing. So the first reason you care is it's a scalability that you have not known any other way. All those other registers are parallel computers, but they're all just as inefficient, and I can only have so many of them. But yet, and at the end of the talk I'll show you, I can potentially do certain kinds of calculations all intents and purposes, instantaneously. And if you don't know about the new Amazon store, meet me on the side, I'll explain it, but there is no register. I just walk in and walk out, and I pay for my stuff. So pieces of the puzzle, quantum entanglement. Now the reason I'm going to give you pieces of the puzzle is I get asked questions, how in the world can this work? Remember, nobody really knows exactly why all this does this, so I can't tell you why it does it. I can only tell you we can prove to you that it does it. And it's a lot smarter people than me that can prove it. So the first one's quantum entanglement. So I can take two or more photons that instantaneously, when I mess with the one, I mess with the other. And this isn't limited to a pair. Last year, the most excitement in the computer world was a person got 50 of these entangled at the same time. That's 50 different actions all happening instantaneously. Your computer doesn't do that. Quantum computers do that. So the first piece is you have to trust that when one, it touches the other. And we don't even have the time to get over the distance that this can occur, et cetera. It would blow your mind. Next one. I only showed one. There's interference too, which is subtraction, because I just want to get across to you how math is done. So I can do superpositioning. So the curves you have there is, remember that a photon is both a wave and a particle. So if I can add, I can take the energy from one photon, combine it with the energy wave of another, and I come up with a new, completely valid quantum state, which is that third red line you see. Does everybody get that's adding? That's it. By the way, interference is subtraction. Well, I didn't put a slide in because I figured you'd be there, right? Okay? Now, you just figured out more than most of this country understands about quantum computing. We could go home now. You're way ahead of the curve that even how it could possibly work. Let's go to the next one. Electrons play in this world, so now I'm getting into some of the particles. Remember, we're trying to build a quantum computer using quantum mechanics. Not everybody does it the same way. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. Most use photons, but you can use electrons in certain ways. And what's important here is understand that that electron's really all over the place, and it's only when we go to measurement that we actually know where that electron is. It's a probability distribution when we don't measure it. We don't know how to measure things in the quantum world without disturbing them. That doesn't mean someday somebody might not figure that out. But today, nobody in the world's figured out how to touch a quantum state without interfering with it. By the way, let me give you one more thing of quantum mechanics, because I just want to get you how bizarre this world is. I can take two pieces of gold, very small pieces of gold, and the temperature that they melt at is higher than it is in what you've been told in your books. So I can take two teeny-weeny pieces of gold and have them rolled in each other with nothing else in the world changing, temperature, pressure, or anything else, and suddenly they become a solid. That's not what you observe in your normal world. I'm trying to help you understand how different this world is. Next, photon. This is the key player, the number one if you do a quantum computer, though I'm going to show you one that doesn't work this way because you can actually buy it today, is you can do this. And so these three slides get the basic gist. I can actually spin the photon, so I can actually come up with a status for ones and a status for zeros. This is one way to do it. It's not the only way to do it. Okay? They're spooky action addition, Einstein's words. If you can get away with it, I can get away with it. So that means they're entangled. So when I change the one, the other changes. And I can use those representations to create a binary number, which I can interpret into a normal number like we have here. So we have a number set. We have a way to do mathematics. We have a way to influence it, primarily through some sort of electrical magnetic. Again, that's another reason the electron's there. Electrons go in. You typically, by absorbing a photon, if it goes to a lower shell, you typically can emit a photon without getting into all that physics. So you get the idea now? Does that work? Okay, then let's jump. Go. So this is a specific computer that I was having dinner. I'm very lucky to have dinner with the chief technology officer of IBM. And at that dinner, he, of course, said, well, that's interesting, but that's not a quantum computer. That's not even a quantum computer in any way, shape, or form. Fair enough. I'm not here to have that debate. But he does use quantum mechanisms to make this computer run, and you can buy it today. So I'm going to give you another reason to be concerned, and then what you might do with this computer. Now, this is a very, very specialized computer. This particular one can't do general quantum techniques. But I just told you in the quantum world, 50 ones and zeros, I'm oversimplifying, ones and zeros, in the regular quantum world is our biggest achievement last year. This computer is 1,000 ones and zeros. That means there's 2 to the 1,000 states. That's a big number. You can't think of anything you can do with 2 to the 1,000 states. Secondly, this hooks up to regular computers. Now, this only does minimization programs and NP complete problems. If on the previous slide, Ty's told me to make up a little time, so I skipped a little stuff. You can ask me questions later. But the short form is, does everybody know what integer programming is? Does anybody know what a traveling salesman problem is? Oh, quick. Okay, let me tell you. Okay, most people didn't nod their heads. For those that did, sorry, go to sleep for 5 seconds. Short form, I got 20 cities to go visit. I can only go to each city once. I can never skip a city. I can never go through a city twice. What's the least cost way for me to get between all those cities? Try it at home. It'll take you a while. Okay? It's a very hard problem. It's called NP complete. That's what this does. So if you happen to have a moderately sized problem today that fits that problem, then you have a need for this computer. And here's what happens, and this is why this slide's here. If you've ever done math programming, and I've done a lot of it, you know about local minimas. What that means is, and by the way, most of your machine learning, et cetera, and again, a gross oversimplification is basically involved in gradient projection. Okay? All right? Which means I'm walking a space, and I'm trying to find a minimum or a maximum. So in this case, this is a local minima. This is a local minima to the problem. This is a local one. Get the idea? Where's the optimization for this? Where's the lowest point? Is it not possible that if I tried to do it with traditional mathematics, trust me, the answer is yes to this, I could get trapped here and not get over there. This computer drops the energy that it simultaneously, with a little leeway, evaluates every position. There isn't any other computer that does that. Integer programs take days to solve. This does 500 simulations in under a second. And by the way, it's not perfect. So there's another problem for you. It doesn't do math perfectly. You have to run 500 simulations because it gets the wrong answer about 10% of the time. But if you run 500 times, you get it 90% right, 99% right, 99.9% right. You get the idea. So 500, you more or less get the optimal answer. And you get it in a second. Pardon? Kind of like a slide rule. Kind of like a slide rule. So you get the idea? All right. That quantum, let me hold. Questions? Though Ty's telling me to rush quick. Questions? Makes sense. Do you care?
How much does this computer cost?
$6 million or something. It's probably the minimum, but you can rent some time. Let me give you a use case. There's 2 we know about sold commercially. I used to work for the NSA. I happen to know a couple has been sold to some unnamed people. I'm giving you another reason to care. Those might be agencies of governments around the world, and the reason they're interested is, have I found a way to de-encrypt your communication? So if you understand factoring 2 prime numbers, people are trying to use this to tear that apart. If that has happened, we wouldn't know about it because it would be a top secret thing to know. What we know is they haven't returned the computers. D-Wave is still in business with investors. Okay, don't think we have time for more. Find me, I'll answer more. Let's do next. So should you care? If you care about encryption, if you have that traveling salesman problem, otherwise you should wait some number of years. With 50 ones and zeros, you can't do a lot. I'm literally talking 50 ones and zeros in the current. But when it sneaks up on you, it's going to have a monumental effect. However, if you have that unique special problem, it's there for you today. Okay? Let's go to the next. Nanotechnology. So how many people have ever owned a cell phone in the room that has a Gorilla Glass on the front of it? If you have a cell phone and you don't have an OLED, you do. Okay, so now could you raise your hands just to see that you're still all awake? Yes, thank you. So nanotechnology is only in your life, so let me give you a reason why. Okay, I have to skip that. So let me give you a reason why. without getting too precise, our friends at Corning managed to take and leach out an oxygen atom and replace it with a sodium, if I remember right. Don't get me wrong, I won't pay any money if I get it wrong, which made that glass stronger, which is a nanotechnique in how they did it, which made them a hell of a lot of money. So should you care about nanotechnology? We'll get to the industries that should, but it's here now. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of products. So this is nano, and go to the bottom line over there, because I've recently had a meal with a friend of mine who's a PhD candidate, and she says, I'm working on 2D materials. And to show you how stupid I was, I said, great, 3M works on 2D materials, I know them, great, let me hook you up. And she laughed her ass off at me. Now, if you know 3M, they actually believe they're the best at 2D materials. They're tapes. That's not a 2D material. That's more than 1 atom thick. I want you to think about what I just shared with you. She's working on materials that can't be any more than 1 atom thick. Next slide. By the way, there's hundreds and hundreds of products now. You can still go to the next slide. There's hundreds and hundreds of slides, and there's lots of products, and there's, hundreds of products. Hundreds, you just don't see them sold to you. Go to your local CVS, buy sunscreen, chances are it's got nanomaterials in it. Okay? So, like all of you, last night we were at dinner, brought up gallium arsenide, and I'm sure that's a discussion you had last night. And all of those techniques to deal with nanomaterials are being used to build other materials. Yes, is it still in its early infancy? I know one person who's got a business, and his problem is he can't hire enough people fast enough that know how to do this technique because he has $1 billion business after another he already knows how to do if he could just get the people. So though Ty put this in the emerging, I'm going to tell you, if you have an enhanced material issue today and you don't have a friend that doesn't understand nanomaterials and what they might do for you, find one. Okay? Next. Brain-computer interface. Before I go to the next one, somebody tell me what the F-35 is. Audience participation. The F-35. It's a fighter plane. So why would I bring up a fighter plane?
Because we use an interface to interact.
Absolutely. Give that person, he gets a free pass. So though we can't officially, because it's a top secret, as far as I could tell, I couldn't find proof of it, I'm going to share you some information about why that F-35. And basically, there's a $400,000 helmet. And it has all kinds of sensors. They haven't admitted it has brain sensors, but I'm going to give you the evidence that it probably does in a minute. So go ahead and then I'll show you that evidence. So this, and I particularly took this somewhat overly graphic slide. I could have gotten far more, trust me, because this works pretty well if I can take your skull off, which is a bit of a problem for everyday use. Okay? And we've proven this. So you'll go out and you'll find that there's a video of a monkey and he's able to get himself a banana, but they embedded the thing inside his brain. You'll find that there's one out there of a lady who's paralyzed and she's able to pick up a cup of coffee with an arm, which is essentially not her arm, but yet her body feels like it's her arm. Now, by the way, that's far more difficult than you think. She picked it up, be able to drink from it, not crush it. So do not think the motor dexterity, et cetera, of what it takes to do that. That's not trivial. There's a third one out there where they took the brain of cats that were looking, because it was very intrusive, at images, and they were able to reconstruct the images. I want you to think about this. From the electrical impulses they measured by putting electrodes in the cat's brain. Okay, got you interested now? The problem is, and particularly those in the oil and gas industry, the problem is I have with this is I can't open your brain. So, next slide. So, I have a problem. And for those in seismic, it's the same as the seismic problem. I have to do Fourier transformations. So when I leave the blood barrier back on, when I put the scalp back on, when I put all this back on, I now muddle the signal. Does that make sense? I can't get close to the brain. I've got reflections. I've got all kinds of interference. That's our problem. That's being worked on. So basically how this works is I put a skull cap on. I'm going to show you one in a second. It's just one. It's one that, by the way, DARPA put out for free. Wonder why they did that. I'll explain in a second. Signal acquisition. I then have to do all kinds of signal processing, a lot of it to get rid of interference. I then have to figure out what that meant for me and then instruct some device to actually do something. That's what this is. Okay, next slide. So here's the good news. You can actually, DARPA, by the way, put the basic plans to do this out there for free. And so some people have printed them. This is about $500, $600 for the skull cap, and that's like $100, $200. That's a 4-channel board. That's cheap now. You could get into it. 4 channels means I could probably do up, right, or left, up, down, left, right. There is a new game, if you'd like to see this in gaming, which is driving a tank around essentially with your brain. Okay? However, we need to get much finer than that. All right, go ahead. So, what you should care about it. If you're into gaming, if you're in medical devices, if you happen to have $400,000 per helmet. So now let me give you a story about why I'm pretty sure it's in there, besides some insider information inside that F-35. DARPA, and you can find this online, in 2015, took a paralyzed lady, embedded electrodes in her brain, and had her at a simulator fly the F-35. Whose audience do you think they did that for? So somebody's figured it out more or less. I do have some pilot friends that suggest to me, though it's still tentative, there are some uses they have for picking up brain signals. So let's see my time contract. Ty said I had to save 5. I have saved 7, so I can take a question or two.